Morning, everybody. What I want to talk about today was some information I got this morning when I was asking myself some questions out on my walk. It's kind of my meditative state, I guess. My mind just kind of turns off and vegetates, and I see what comes in and go with it from there. And I was getting information about what mass consciousness really is and kind of how our reality and our universe works for each individual. And I'll go into some of that a little bit more in a little bit. First, let's take a look at what do people think about the concept of mass consciousness? What is it defined and portrayed as? And it's the idea that a certain percentage of the population dictates the belief and what happens within the reality and even the timeline based upon how many people are believing that way. We say, and we hear all the time, well, we have to change the mass consciousness in order to get the reality of the universe to shift. And in fact, that's a program. Because if you take it a little bit deeper, you start to understand that when they're telling you that others are responsible and accountable for your reality and what happens within your reality, what happens within maybe within the timeline, they are essentially putting you into the state of being a victim. You no longer have power. So the concept of being empowered would fly out the window when you're told that it has to be up to others as to what happens to you. It has to be a certain percentage of the so-called population that has to awaken or change their way of thinking, their consciousness, in order to shift it for everyone else. And as I said, if you really look at that, that means that they're telling us we're still a victim, that we have no power, no control over anything, and that, I know, is not correct. That we have set up our realities, we set up the experiences that we're going to have before we came in here. It has nothing to do with anyone else shifting or portraying it for us. It is strictly us. And I'll get into kind of that universe concept in a minute. What mass consciousness really is the default programming of this reality. And I've gone into that pretty much in detail in some of the other videos about the beliefs and the programs that we are dealing with. And the concept of mass consciousness is, you see everyone doing the same type of thing, and that's because they're following the default programming. They are not going to change and shift your reality. Only you can shift your reality by changing yourself. So the default programming is what we are taught from the time we are in the womb until we come out, until we die, basically. We are brainwashed and told by others what this reality is, what we can and can't do, predominantly what we cannot do. We're told what we're supposed to believe, how we're supposed to behave, and that is really what mass consciousness is. It's simply a default programming, and we can overcome the default programming ourselves by changing our own beliefs. So we have that ability to change the mass consciousness because the mass consciousness is us. It's not anyone else outside of us. One of the things that I've talked about before is and I think it was in the Are Humans Going to Become Creator video, is at some point, I think, through our progression, as we're able to get rid of the beliefs and change those that we have, to remove some of the limitations and accept possibilities above and beyond what we have been told and programmed to do, that we are going to be able to start making some decisions about the reality we're going to be able to experience, shift to. Because remember, before, all realities, all possibilities already exist. All we can do is shift from one to the other. They were already created. We're not creating them. As we're going along, we're simply shifting. And I've still been getting the idea that at some point, as we progress and get rid of those limitations, we're going to be able to, not really say pick, but in a way, I guess, for lack of a better word, pick the reality that we would like to experience within the timeline that we are currently on. You're not going to shift out of that timeline to do that, but within that timeline you're on, we may have the ability to see 2 or 3 different realities and pick which one we are going to experience. Because remember, we will experience all of them at some point or another, but we may have more of what would be considered a conscious awareness of choice. We may even be able to see the outcome of choosing that other reality versus the one that we were initially assigned to go along. I really think that as we are able to get rid of the limitations, we're going to be able to see and experience more. And by doing so, I think we're going to have a choice. We may even be able to go through and experience a reality a certain way. So you make a decision, you go out the door, you go left. You go left and you have the experience of what happens throughout the time when you go left. We may have the ability to go back and make a right and see what we experience from that way. We may even have the ability, as I said, to look out that door and see what happens if we go left, right, straight ahead, up, down, whatever it may be. That we are going to start having those abilities as we progress. And in doing so, we'll take that a little bit deeper, the idea that we're going to be able to start shifting to other realities of awareness. In other words, we're going to be able to experience other experiences by consciously choosing it versus just having it happen and us just experiencing it. Think about the idea that if you're say you're in a restaurant and there are 200 people. It's a very popular, very busy restaurant. Say it's a Chinese restaurant. And you go in this restaurant, and after you get in there, you decide that you don't really care much for the decor, that you really don't feel like Chinese anymore. Maybe you want to have Italian food that night. So you shift your awareness to the reality in which that restaurant is an Italian restaurant. So now you're going to be experiencing that. If the idea that everyone else around us is involved in that, and let's say that they're there, those 200 people, some of those decided that they don't like an Italian restaurant. They don't like the decor you have chosen, so now they decide they're going to make it a French restaurant with French decor. Or others decide they want it back to the Chinese as it was before, or whatever food they want. You would have people shifting awarenesses back and forth with everybody in the restaurant if everybody was doing it for themselves. So that you would essentially just be battling each other to see who becomes dominant and who gets to pick what they want for that time. So the only way that that could be in operation is if, and this goes back to the concept of some of the Kabbalists and others that I've heard and read, that each of us is within our own universe. We are ourselves, and everyone else here in this reality with us is here to, or a projection of what I call the Sims background people, of the reality in order to help us to have the experience that we are and had chosen to happen, and in order to make it seem more real. So the people that we have around us, even though they may seem to be real, within our universe, within our reality, they are not real. Of course, neither are we. But the concept is, it's not their choice in order to shift your reality. No one else can shift your awareness within your reality or your universe. They can only do it within themselves. So let's say back to that restaurant, maybe there are, let's say there's a dozen people in there who are really conscious beings, who have a soul and are not just sim or background players in order to make and enhance the reality, to make it seem more real to us, kind of like a video game. And each of those people would be within their own universe. And so when you decided you wanted to shift that Chinese, you wanted to shift your awareness to, instead of a Chinese, to an Italian restaurant, when you did so, everybody within that restaurant, all 200 people, would shift to an aspect of them that would not know that they had shifted to the Italian. To them, they would have decided to have gone to an Italian restaurant that night with the decor and everything else. There would be no combativeness between any of you as far as which reality is going to have precedent, who wants to change what, because they are within your universe. It's your universe, and within your universe, everyone else is a projection within that universe, and they're there to help you. And so whatever you do, whatever shifts that you make, affect everyone else without them really being aware that they have been shifted, because the aspect of them that was in that other reality is they're going to be there to help you. And it's the same within their universe. Say if they went to the restaurant and one of them decided they wanted to have a French food that night and it changed the decor, they shift themselves to the Chinese restaurant that now became a French restaurant, and you were there. Well, the you that is there is a projection within their reality, within their universe. And that projection of you would not know that you had shifted or changed because it is their universe and their reality. So you are the only one that is going to shift within your reality, and everything else around you that we perceive as being around us, the people and everything else, they will shift simultaneously with us to aspects of them that are in that possibility. Because remember, all possibilities are playing out, all decisions are being played out and have played out all at the same time, and you're shifting it. Just like they will control their reality, you will control yours. So the concept of mass consciousness does not exist in the way it's being portrayed. We are not victims by any stretch of the imagination. We are the beings, we are the powerful beings. And I'm not talking about the humans. I'm not talking about Ron, like in this video. And when I go back to that restaurant, the idea that there would be another Ron in that other restaurant that the other person would shift their reality to, that's very possible, but that Ron would not be aware that they're shifting, because that Ron is only a projection of what would be, I guess, this Ron, so to speak, but they would still be experiencing it. But it would be there kind of like the background in a video game. You know, the things when you go through a video game, there's whatever door you open, whatever portal you go through, the scene is already there. Now you're simply experiencing that, and all the players and all the entities and things that are within that game are now shifting based upon the decision that you have made. The shift that you have made shifts everything else. So there is no fighting, there is no combat between people about shifting realities. So mass consciousness, as projected out there by others, is simply another program of control to disempower you. You are the only one that is controlling your reality. The way your awareness is shifting is up to what you have decided before you came into what we call the human form, with our lack of memory, so to speak. And even if you get to the point, or we get to the point to where we can consciously shift realities to one that we would prefer versus the other one, that is still something that was already pre-planned and pre-projected. We're not doing, and we can't do anything that wasn't already set up ahead of time, but we're simply going to be able to experience the concept of maybe making a choice versus what we have now, which really is no choice. And even that, if you go back to what my definition of that from my book in the first video I did with Patricia, the concept of choice is we have no choice of free will. And I look at that as, can you say that you really have choice when someone has told you what your choices are going to be, when they've been narrowed down for you? So you don't really have a choice when someone else is already picking for you. You can pick out of it. It's a pick, not a choice, really, because you're not making that determination. And so the same thing will be later on when we start shifting to where we can maybe see 2 or 3 realities at the same time and pick the one we want to experience. Awareness, we will still be experiencing the other ones, but our awareness will shift to the one that we wanted to experience a little more, or maybe go back and do the other one at the same time, or do the other one what we would call afterwards. But it's still going to be already what's set up ahead of time, because as long as we are in a projection of a physical form, we are not, and I don't really mean to say we're not our spirit self. We are our spirit self, but the projection and awareness that we have is through the human form, not the spirit form, which has no limitations at all. And the other thing too, if you start looking at the idea, like in this reality and in this timeline that we're on, the role that I'm playing is Ron, and Ron only exists within this timeline that we are portraying. If we shift to another timeline, the character that my awareness is in as Ron may not exist in that other timeline. I may be Bill or Bob or Jane or Debbie or someone else, Fido or Kitty. So it's what I've been getting is that the character, the role we're playing now, is only the role or character within the time that we're going into. And when we shift the timeline, which I believe we're already doing, we're in the stages of shifting the timeline, that final reboot may only kick in once we leave the role that we're in now and we will shift to another role within the other timeline and play all that out as well. I don't know that, the feeling I've been getting is that the concept of the role we're playing here does not exist in all the other timelines, because each of those other timelines has other possibilities of playing out, and the character of Ron may not, the role of Ron may not exist in those, because there's no need for it within that other timeline. The same for the role of each of you. Anyway, we'll see if that makes any sense, and thank you very much for listening.